I hope everybody is doing well. I know here in Durham, North Carolina, we might be having to have people build arcs and all along those lines because there's definitely been some rainy weather, but not as bad as it's been in Jamaica and other places that have been hit by Melissa, that hurricane, and all along those lines. I think we're just getting remnants with a little bit of rain and all along that line because I know that it's been probably about 2 or 3 days of rain, and there's definitely some more rain today. It was a pretty intense rain on yesterday and all along those lines, but it's not been too bad. But folks are definitely doing what they can to stay dry as possible and all along those lines. And of course, people are following the sports world and they're following what's going on with the playoffs. I know that I made the mistake a couple of days ago of staying up for an 18 inning game. I didn't catch all of the game, but I did think I was up at least in the 14th or 15th inning and might have then finally got some rest. And then I woke up and found out it was a basically two games in one and all along those lines because they played 18 innings. And in that case, the Dodgers won. But then yesterday, Toronto came back. So we're in a 2-2 series and all along those lines. And this evening, they'll have a rubber match with actually it's a best of three series right now and all along those lines because they're tied 2-2. And the next game is in Dodger Stadium and all along those lines. And then they'll play at least one, maybe two more in Toronto. I don't know about my guess, but I'm thinking this could be a 7 game series, which is better than what the teams that I was rooting for did because they got swept by the Dodgers. Because as many of you know that watch this show, I went to Marquette. And when I went to Marquette, I became a Milwaukee Brewers fan and all along those lines. And like I said, I was hoping that they could get at least one win, but they didn't get a win at all, lost both games at home, and then managed to lose both games in LA as well. So like I said, don't really have a dog in this particular fight and all along those lines, but it's still interesting to watch every once in a while. Just like I've been catching some of the football games, and Bill Belichick is not doing that well at the UNC. As a matter of fact, I think he's like, matter of fact, his record might be the same as my record in fantasy football. I think they're like 2-5 or something like that, and that's what I am. I'm like 2-5, or it might even be 2-6 or something like that. I think that they said I've got to win the rest of my games if I expect to make it into the playoffs, unless I make it to what everybody makes it to if they don't make it in, which is what they call the sucker bowl in our particular league, and all along those lines. So not doing well. Probably heading to the Sucker Bowl, and by the time I construct this team, maybe I can do well and win that because you do win a little bit of money in that particular space and all along those lines. But I'm going to see my guess if he's been following those kind of stories or he's been following politics. But I do know that he has a wonderful idea of what to do with hurricanes. And I'm not talking about the Carolina Hurricanes, which is our hockey team here that got off to a 5-0 start. And now they've lost to a couple of very good opponents like the Las Vegas Golden Knights and a couple of others. So I think that they're like around 6-2 or something along that line. But they do have a winning record in there. Definitely looks like they could be playoff contenders and all along those lines. But I'm bringing my guest, Todd Medema, who has got this book called Author of How to Surf a Hurricane. So, and I don't think you're talking about surfing a holiday or hurricane, hockey hurricane, but how to surf a real hurricane. And the folks in Jamaica might need to learn that lesson. So tell us about how to surf a hurricane, since apparently the folks in Jamaica got hit really hard, and I think it hit in Cuba really hard as well. I haven't seen those kind of intense hurricane winds, even though we do sometimes get them in North Carolina. There have been a number of hurricanes that have hit North Carolina. My mom still teases me to this day, and I'm in my 60s and everything like that. But I managed to sleep through a hurricane. Don't ask me how you managed to sleep through a hurricane, but I managed to sleep through it because she was like woke me up and then showed me some of the damage in our backyard and everything. And I'm going like, I guess I was knocked out because I sure did not wake up.
Well, that is very impressive. Thanks for having me on, Mark. And that's right. I'm Todd Medema, the author of How to Surf a Hurricane. It's a hopeful climate heist that does, in fact, involve surfing hurricanes. So hopefully it's thrilling enough that you don't sleep through it.
Hopefully I don't sleep through it. So tell us how you came about writing this book and what the book you're hoping to accomplish with the book and all along those lines.
Yeah, so I set out to write a story of hope about climate change. I think there's a lot of news out there that's really depressing and scary. And I wanted to shift the narrative a bit and remind people that there is hope and excitement. And so hurricane surfing specifically is actually a sport I invented for the book, asking this idea of like, okay, sure, we're going to have more extreme weather, we're going to have more hurricanes, but like, what's something fun and inspirational that we as humans could do with it? What if we turned it into an extreme sport?
Okay. Hey, that sounds like an interesting idea. What do you think about what Bill Gates says? Because Bill Gates recently came out, and we talked about this just briefly on our news show yesterday, but he's saying that we need to shift the tone on how we're handling climate change and all along those lines. So he definitely has come out, and everybody knows that Bill Gates is a tech giant, so one of the founders, if I remember correctly, of Microsoft, and all along those lines. But he's saying that there's a doomsday view of climate change and all along those lines. And he says climate change is serious, but we've made great progress. We need to keep backing the breakthroughs that will help the world reach zero emissions. And he also says we can't cut funding for health and development programs to help people stay resilient in the face of climate change to do it. And it's time to put human welfare at the center of our climate strategies, which include reducing the green premium to zero and improving agriculture and health in poor countries. It sounds like that's a good idea. He's also saying there's a doomsday view of climate change that goes like this. In a few decades, catalytic climate change will decimate civilizations. The evidence is all around us. Just look at the heat waves and storms caused by rising global temperatures. Nothing matters more than limiting the rise in temperature. And he's saying, fortunately for all of us, this view is wrong. So what is your take on what he just put out? And I think he just wrote this on Gates Notes like recently, like in the last few days.
Yeah. So I haven't read his particular remarks, but based on what you're saying, it sounds like he and I probably agree on this idea that climate change is not the end, and that almost by telling ourselves these doomsday stories, we're actually limiting our potential. If we only see the future as it's going to be terrible, we don't really try to fight for anything. Like literally, what would the point be? But if we believe that there is hope, human beings are such incredible. We're so incredible at having hope and making things happen because we believe they can happen. And so, if by doing my small part, writing this book, reminding us that there is hope, I'm hoping that we can continue to just believe and make a better future actually possible, because there's still so many things that we can do. Like he was saying, with agricultural, with green products and renewable energy, there's so many things that we can still do that will still make the future better.
Yeah, because one of the things he was also adding was that although climate change will hurt poor people more than anyone else, I mean, we're even seeing that to some degree in Jamaica, because that's not a overly rich country and everything like that. But for the vast majority of them, it will not be the only or even the biggest threat to their lives and welfare. He's saying the biggest problems are poverty and disease, just as they always have been. And understand this will let us focus our limited resources and interventions that will have the greatest impact for the most vulnerable people. I mean, we even hear people talk about housing issues, and it's not just here, because I know earlier today, I think it was in one of the European countries, that they're having a housing crisis. And of course, we know there are various housing crises here in the West and everything like that, and particularly in the US. But I'm just wondering your take on this notion that may focusing so much on climate change, we're taking away from some of the other things that probably need more quicker action.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting discussion, right? Because it's hard to stack rank them, like, oh, like we should prioritize housing before climate, before like these other things. But I think it is actually really important that we recognize that there are multiple interconnected crises happening.
Right.
I heard a friend recently call it the poly crisis, and I think that's a pretty good term for it. This idea that there's a lot of different issues happening, and they're all kind of related. You mentioned housing specifically, and I think it's a limited view to think of housing as separate from the climate crisis.
Right.
On one hand, the climate crisis is contributing to the housing crisis. Changing climate patterns, droughts, extreme weather, it's destroying housing stock, and it's forcing people to move out of areas that are no longer habitable. So it's contributing to housing. And housing can play a role in the climate crisis. Buildings are some of our biggest producers of emissions. And so if we think of them together, as we're building this new housing stock for climate refugees, we can build it smarter, more energy efficient housing to actually reduce our impact on the climate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the founders of this particular network, Pod TV and everything like that, he sometimes brings up this notion. I'd love to hear your thought around it, because he ties it into climate and housing. He's asked the question, if you know that you're moving to an area that is impacted by climate, why would you move there and why would you stay there? Because he brings up like New Orleans and even people that have their houses on beachfront property, whether that's Miami or whether that's North Carolina and things along those lines. So I just wanted your take on that, because that's what some people will say, is that if you know that you're in a bad climate zone, that it ought to be just easy to move from those zones. But we know that not everybody has those resources that they can just up and leave and go to wherever they feel like going. And some of them are born into those zones, be it New Orleans or be it a number of other places.
Yeah, and I think these issues are pretty complicated. So the idea of like being able to simplify it into just, no one should move into these zones is we should be wary of arguments that are not nuanced.
Right.
You can turn it into a clickbaity headline. It's like, oh, like why would you move into a hurricane zone? But the reality is, like, a pretty significant portion of the East Coast is affected by hurricanes to some degree.
Right.
Florida, obviously, but like New York City, they've been hit by some hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
Even in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, like hundreds of miles inland, we've gotten the after effects of some pretty severe storms from hurricanes. And so it's kind of a bit of a dangerous oversimplification to be like, you shouldn't live in anywhere affected by climate change, because really, at the end of the day, everywhere is affected by it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, we're seeing that with Hurricane Melissa. Like I said, it's been impacting the weather here in North Carolina, even though the big hit has been definitely in the Caribbean so far. It doesn't mean that other parts of the mainlands won't get hit at some point, because I haven't looked to see which way the path was going and all along those lines. But even when they're off the coast, it still can impact you with, as you're saying, heavy, intense rains and all along those lines. But I'm liking this idea of it being an extreme sport, because, I mean, one of the things that people admire quite a bit and everything like that is the folks that are hurricane watchers, and definitely hear about them doing the news and everything like that, the ones that want to go into the eye of a hurricane and everything. But you're talking about not even being in a plane, which can be bad enough and everything, or a helicopter, but actually going and trying to surf a wave while there is a hurricane going on, which some people would be like, that sounds very dangerous, and why would we try to do that in the middle of a hurricane? Even though I've seen people do some things that are very interesting. As a matter of fact, I was just watching a movie, because I'm part of a documentary film committee and everything like that. And the movie was dealing with some folks that were extras on a certain famous movie, Apocalypse Now. And there is that scene, I think, in that movie where there are people surfing during the middle of a war zone and everything along those lines. So I just wanted your take on doing these extreme things in crazy times.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would ever personally surf in a hurricane or in a war zone, but I think there are some humans that really crave that excitement. One of the beautiful things about the human species is that we have such a diversity of personalities and things that people get passionate about. Some people, really want to explore or do extreme sports. And so I can only imagine that the group that is really excited about extreme sports is going to be constantly innovating and trying to find newer, more extremer sports. And so, like on the book's cover, it actually depicts the ship that surfs the hurricane. You have the little cockpit here, and then you have the foils and the wings. So, they're trying to be smart about it. They're not just like going out there on a surfboard. They're actually like designing and building boats. But even then, it's still packed with danger and thrills.
Yeah. But by the way, are you into any extreme sports yourself? And that's what draw you into this parallel kind of like idea for this book, as a way to bring the situation in there? Because you mentioned that you would not do that, but that doesn't mean that you would not do other things. So I can tell you, just in my own life, I had a ex-girlfriend that tried to get me into skydiving, and to me, a plane has one purpose, which is to get you to the other destination, not to fall out of it. But that's just me. I know other people that love the idea of skydiving, but I was not all that keen on the idea, even though she was trying to pitch it to me and all along those lines. So I just wondered, are there any extreme sports that you yourself have engaged in, or you like me with skydiving, you're like, that's okay, you people can have it?
So I did skydive once. I'm terrified of heights, and so it was kind of a bucket list, like prove to myself that I could do it. It was in fact terrifying, and I have no urge to do it again, but I'm glad I did it once. More recently, I've been getting into scuba diving, which I don't think qualifies as extreme per se, but it's been a pretty interesting blend of, a sport, you're going out, you're swimming, you're in nature, seeing fish, but also a bit of like that technical element where you're managing your gas and your depth and pressure. So that's been a fun new hobby.
Yeah, well, part of your book is also labeled as a heist thriller because definitely you've got this idea and all of those lines. And of course, we've had major heists. We just had the one that involved the Louvre, and of course, there have been other major heists as well. So, is there any hope in your world that they will turn this book into not just a climate change advocacy book, but also a movie, since it is labeled as a heist thriller and everything
I
like that?
It would make me so happy if this book turned into a movie. And I've actually had a lot of people read it who just, they finished the book and they're like, this would make an amazing movie. I actually kind of based the pacing and the visual sense of it off of a movie called How to Blow Up a Pipeline.
Mhm.
I literally like kind of watched the movie and took notes on how they did it with the pacing, when they cut, what they covered in each scene, and use that as a template for How to Surf a Hurricane. So yeah, I would love to see it turned into a movie.
It sounds like a great idea, but you also talk on something in the book that is very much a not concept that a lot of people are worried about because sometimes it is in the news too much and everything like that. So, where does corporate sabotage fit in this book and everything like that? Because that is something that a lot of people are seeing in the real world as well, and sometimes it can make for some interesting stories. A thing that I wish had been made into a movie. It was one of my favorite books, but it kind of like is this notion of using fiction to and even nonfiction to raise awareness about the climate. But there was a very popular book written by a gentleman named The Fox, and that was his moniker and everything. But it was a book called Ecotage, and it was basically at a time that corporations were being sabotaged in another way. So he saw the pollution. So one of the things that he would do is like if there was say pollution in a fishing town in Michigan, he might find a bunch of those dead fish, sneak into the corporate president's office, and leave them a nice president that they really didn't want, which was basically the dead fish on their lovely desks, which is probably like some expensive desk that they had brought in and all along those lines. But definitely that was something that he did, and he did it for a number of years until he passed away, I think about a decade or two ago, and all along those lines. But I just wondered, how does corporate sabotage play into this particular book?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a heist against a corporation, so it's a central part of the plot. And I think history shows us that like people generally want to solve problems in a productive way. Like
Right.
they're willing to vote on things, they're willing to protest, they're willing to work hard on things, but eventually, if a system really chronically fails at people, to the point that it's causing health, safety, like loss of life,
Mhm.
eventually the people have no other choice than to kind of go outside of the law. You look at like the French Revolution, and like I'm sure they tried for a long time to get the royals to listen to their needs and
Mhm.
get their needs met, but eventually enough was enough, and they had to escalate their commitment. So, I really hope that our systems work, that we can provide feedback to our corporations and our government to work with them in a productive manner.
Yeah, that makes sense. When did you become a climate activist and everything like that? Because one of the things that we hear about climate activism is we hear certain names. I mean, Greta is definitely in the name quite a bit and all along those lines. And of course, she's been trying to get aid to the folks in Gaza and all in that space and has been turned back, I think, 2 or 3 times, or maybe even more times than that. But I'm just wondering, were you somebody that, because you mentioned growing up in Pennsylvania, we know Pennsylvania has had some incidences where there had been some climate problems and everything, maybe not as much as Detroit, and definitely not where the where the climate justice movement was started. Because actually, the climate justice, just to give you an idea of my thoughts around the climate justice movement, I was born here in Durham, which is where I live at now, the home of Duke University and North Carolina Central University, and a number of other great things, including the Research Triangle Park and all along those lines. But my years of my teen years were spent in Warrenton. Warrenton was where the famous chemical dump was made, and some people would say that that was the birthplace of the climate justice movement, as people were protesting against this dump by a corporation into a very poor rural area, and the whole notion was that they wouldn't really put up a fight, even though they did put up a fight, and that's the notion of the climate change movement being started there, and all along those lines. So when did you personally, Todd, get involved in climate justice and think that this was something that you wanted to go into, particularly having like a software engineering experience and product management background? Chuck, you might have even worked in North Carolina for a while.
I have not worked in North Carolina, but it sounds like a wonderful place. I think in some ways it started when I was quite young. I was heavily involved in Boy Scouts, and we did a lot of stuff in nature. And I think when you're exposed to nature a lot, you just start to care about it. You like it. You go on a hike, you see the birds and the trees, and you're like, yes, I want this to keep existing. And being in Pittsburgh, I think, gave me a really direct appreciation for how that can go away and how human action can make it come back. Because Pittsburgh historically used to be a steel town. And so the city was filled with steel mills that belched out ugly, horrible, toxic black pollution everywhere. And you can still see little scars of it around the city. Maybe a building hasn't been power washed in 50 years and it's still coated in like black soot from these steel mills. But the thing is, the city has since cleaned up. There's only like one steel mill left. The air pollution is really recovered. And so you look at that and you're like, this is such an important lesson of, if we do it wrong, we will, destroy your local environment. And if we do it right, we can really clean it up.
Yeah, and definitely that's something that folks are going into. You've also been involved in a lot of things that I find quite fascinating and everything along those lines, and I'd love to hear you talk about some of those as well and everything. Because earlier today, and I just literally stumbled across it and everything like that, but you are definitely involved in some interesting hobbies and everything. And one of those is this whole notion of time travel and all along those lines. And ironically, earlier today, I was watching a documentary that made the point that there are certain folks that have been around that folks are saying have done time travel, and then there are things that can't be explained. Like I think there was an example in this 10-minute video I was watching of a person that was outside of their time, but their dress was outside of their time period. And there was another picture, and I think it's a famous picture of a woman that apparently was using a cell phone, even though the picture was taken in the 1930s and all along those lines. So this also seems to be an interesting hobby of yours as well. So if you don't mind going into that, I'm just curious, your notion of, is time travel actually something that's possible, and have there been examples? Because like I said, I just happened to stumble across this video, and now I'm meeting you, and you're in that same space in terms of a hobby and an interest. So I just wondering your take on this notion of time travel.
Yeah, so you must be referring to, on my website, toddmaidema.com, one of my resume items is time traveler. And this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference to a photography project that I've been doing for many years, where I fix a camera in one position and take one photo a minute for an entire day. Mm-hmm. And then I turn it into wallpapers for your computer, where the wallpaper changes every minute so that it matches the lighting outside. Imagine if your wallpaper was like, oh, it's like sunny outside, now it's like sunny in the Caribbean, or like sunny over Jerusalem or something. Right. And so, it's not actual time travel, but it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference to this idea of like photography. Because, usually we think of photography as just a static photo, but the idea of like the photo kind of moving through time is a fun thing to play with.
Yeah, not only that, but that's kind of even part of what my thoughts was going when I was watching this particular documentary. Because like I said, they were making a cogent argument and all along those lines, but they probably had some faults in it. For example, you can definitely overlay a picture from a modern image into a newer image, and then it can even look as if it is fitting in. And I imagine you can do the same, even though I've got friends in filmmaking, with film as well and everything. Like I said, there's the famous picture of this young lady that is walking and carrying something that could be a cell phone. It could be something else, but they make it seem as if it's a cell phone, even though it's in the 1930s and all along those lines. But we know that there can be all kinds of ways that you can create images that aren't necessarily there.
Yeah, between AI tools that let you actually manipulate images, and then the human mind, which is very good at kind of storytelling and seeing the thing that we want to see. If you kind of suggest to people like, oh yeah, that person's holding a cell phone, you're going to be a lot more likely to think that whatever they're holding, be it a banana or a shoe, or what your brain is more likely to interpret it as a cell phone.
Yeah, because a lot of that can be interpretation and all along those lines. there's a popular company that you have, like I said, I was looking at the resume and everything along those lines that you worked with that has been mentioned on a couple of our shows. So I was wondering your experience working with both of them, and I'll tell you what they are. But it sounds like you were a staff product manager for Tesla, and Tesla has definitely been mentioned on a couple of our shows, including the World Economic Forum with Dr. Sharif out of Bangladesh and everything like that. But also we have an investment show, and on that investment show, they have mentioned Palantir. And I'm not that familiar with either of those companies, having not worked in that kind of field and all along those lines. But you being in the engineering field and everything, I just wondered if you could share a little bit about your own personal experience working with Tesla and working with Palantir, since both of those are in the news now.
Yeah, so Palantir, I was an intern there many years ago during college. The company as a whole provides data analysis capabilities. So, whether you're trying to trace a disease back to the patient zero or trying to catch someone committing financial fraud, they take a look at larger data sets and trying to find really how things are connected. So I was helping them do financial analysis for a banking customer. Tesla, obviously in the news a lot. They make electric vehicles, but they also do energy storage and renewable energy. And so that's the part I was working on. It's what they call the Megapack, which is a battery that's the size of a shipping container. And they deploy hundreds and thousands of these to help stabilize the grid and help provide clean, renewable electricity to countries around the world.
Yeah. I've got friends that have driven for Uber, but you were actually working on the corporate side of Uber. So what was that like working with that particular company? Because they've been in the news as well. And like you said, it sounds like you might have been working on the self-driving part of it and all along those lines. And I know that that's been in the news quite often lately because they're trying to get away from having many of us drive a car, and that could even be a way to make the climate better. And I'm a non-driver, by the way. I get around by mass transit, the buses, and some of the buses have even become more environmentally conscious because they're doing more things like with, I think, hydro and some other ways of making the buses more environmentally friendly.
Yeah. So I did work on self-driving cars at Uber for a bit. It was kind of a childhood dream of mine. Grew up watching sci-fi and thinking that it'd be so cool to help build self-driving cars. And I mean, it's a very cool field to work in. It's really at the bleeding edge of technology and what we're capable of doing as humans. Easily on par, if not much more complicated than going to the moon. And so it was very cool to work on that. And, I think self-driving as a whole is a technology, just like any other technology, where it can be kind of used for good or bad. Take nuclear technology, for example. You can either turn it into clean, unlimited nuclear power or nuclear bombs. And self-driving has kind of a similar challenge in front of it, which is we can either deploy self-driving as this limited, expensive tool, just for elite people to kind of further get economic advantage of you're already a millionaire and now you can work while your car drives itself to work. Or we can look at this as a tool for really fundamentally improving everyone's quality of life. If we use it, like you're saying with buses, I learned recently that the bus system in Pittsburgh, about a third of their revenue comes from government subsidies, and about a third of their expenses comes from paying bus drivers. And so you look at that and you think, wait, if we can have autonomous buses, we can eliminate any form of government subsidy and make the bus system self-funding and have so many more buses available to people, and just how profoundly that would improve everyone's quality of life in just accessibility to transit. And then, these buses are electric, and so it's reducing traffic, it's improving our air quality. There's such an opportunity for hope there.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and this has been a dream of mine for decades and everything along those lines, because right now when I want to go to a family outing, in a few weeks we'll have Thanksgiving and everything along those lines, I depend on my brother or one of my aunts that lives here to get me to mom's house for the Thanksgiving meal and all along those lines, because I've had one car in my life and all along those lines, and later in life discovered that I had dysgraphia, which is part of the reason that I don't drive and everything like that. So if I'm hearing you correctly, there may be a point in life where I won't have to wait for my nephews who are about to be driving age. Matter of fact, they're I think working on their permits and licenses now, but I can actually jump in a car and it can take me to my mom's house by me just telling it, where she lives at, and it'll get me there without me having to worry about driving and possibly crashing it because of the dysgraphia and all along those lines. So that sounds like that could be happening in the next 5, 10, 15 years, or it might not happen in my lifetime.
No, I haven't worked directly in the industry for a few years, but I still follow it pretty closely. And between Waymo and Tesla and some of the other companies in the space, it really seems like, if you live in a big city, easily in the next 5 years, you won't need to drive a car ever again. And then the scopes that they operate in just keep expanding. So I don't know, maybe within like 10 years, if you live like really remotely, you would still be able to just totally hands off, never have to drive.
Well, that could be interesting. That could be interesting how that plays out and everything along those lines. One of the things that we have on this network, and it's a friend of mine has been involved in it. He's actually involved in a number of ways in it. He used to have a show called The Gamers Den and all along those lines. But I saw that you were also a game designer. So I just wondered if you could tell a little bit about what Expedition is, Electrify, and Solarpunk Pen Pals, because apparently you've designed these games or helped in the design of these games and all along those lines. And I do know that, like I said, Gamers Den is on hiatus at the moment, but it may come back on the network. But he does appear on our new show as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game industry and your involvement with it.
Yeah, so I've designed 3 games. The first is Expedition, the role-playing card game, and it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons for busy people.
Okay.
It's a deck of cards and a companion app with over 100 stories built in that you can play through. You don't even need a dungeon master. So it's light and fun. Raised over 100,000 on Kickstarter, and has been. We have an active community of people who are writing new stories for it. So if that interests you, you can check it out at expeditiongame.com. After that, as I got more into climate, I wondered how we could use game design to help educate people about the climate. And so I created this Electrify, which is a game that teaches people specifically about renewable energy. It's kind of like a tycoon style game where you're running an electricity company and you have to make decisions about, what power plants to build, balancing your budget, your emissions, making sure your customers don't have blackouts. And so that's a free web game available at electrifygame.com. And then most recently, actually as an artifact of writing the book, I've gotten more into the Solarpunk community. Solarpunk, for those who don't know, is a new artistic genre that it kind of is the opposite of cyberpunk. Like cyberpunk is very technology is going to make the future miserable, and like the best we can do is like rebel. And Solarpunk is we as humans working with nature can make the future awesome, and we're going to like rebel against the shitty system by just like making things awesome with each other. And so in discovering this genre, and it's very new and not a lot of people have heard about it. So I partnered with an artist to make an activity called Solarpunk Pen Pals, which is a cozy storytelling activity for 2 or more people where you imagine a hopeful solarpunk future, and then you picture yourself in it, or you come up with a character in that future, and you write letters back to each other, just pen pal letters. And we've had a lot of people go through that activity and really walk away like crying out of just like joy and hope and optimism and inspiration. It's really been beautiful to see. So if you're interested in doing that, it's a totally free activity. It's just solarpunkpenpals.com.
Okay, I definitely know that some of our listeners and some of our folks that watch this show will definitely be interested in that, so I'll pass that information on to them. If I remember correctly, another group that you were involved with, I think was one of the sponsors. And if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that if I remember correctly, because I did attend it briefly, because I was doing that split shift work thing that I do sometimes, and all along those lines. But I think that if I remember correctly, some of the unions, but also Citizens Climate Lobby, was sponsors or part of the sponsors of the No King movement, and all along those lines and everything like that. So I just wanted your take on the Citizens Climate Lobby. And am I correct in thinking that they were one of the sponsoring organizations? Because I thought I saw their name associated with it, but I don't always remember everything correctly. I am 63.
Yeah, I don't know if they sponsored No Kings or not. I'll have to look into that. But yeah, I volunteered with Citizens Climate Lobby for many years, and I love it. I think if you care about climate and you want to participate in it more, and are looking for a community to join, Citizens Climate Lobby is one of the best out there. They're really focused on direct, actionable solutions, especially in terms of lobbying the government. Citizens Climate Lobby, it's in the name. But while I was there, the big thing they were focusing on is this idea of a carbon fee and dividend,
Right.
which really spoke of how thoughtful the organization was about their approach. So a carbon fee and dividend is this idea that the government puts a fee on carbon emission at the source. So anytime you mine coal or oil or natural gas, you have to pay a fee
Mm-hmm.
for the carbon that it will eventually emit when you burn it. But it's not a tax. The government's not just taking that money and like hiring more soldiers, but it's a fee and dividend, which means all of that money, every single dollar, gets returned to you as a citizen. So you might pay more at the pump for your gasoline, but you get that money back. But what it does is it creates this amazing market incentive where things actually cost their impact. Right now, carbon emission is this hidden externality that no one really knows, like, oh, how much carbon is in my carton of eggs. But by making it very explicit of like, oh, gas is more expensive because it has a lot of carbon in it, you as a consumer can make a very easy choice. You're going to buy the cheaper thing, and the cheaper thing is now better for the planet. Just this beautiful, perfectly engineered thing where you're giving the money back to the people while letting them make smarter choices about what's less impactful.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything like that. I know that here in North Carolina, there's been a lot of activity around unions and around workers' rights and things along those lines. And definitely there are a number of organizations. And I know in Pennsylvania, there's also been a lot. Past presidential candidate, Mr. Shapiro, the House governor, and all along those lines, has been definitely a supporter of workers and all along those lines. So I'm just curious a little bit more to know about this worker cooperative advocate work that you were doing.
Yeah. So, this is actually another thing I discovered through writing How to Surf a Hurricane, because, on one hand, it's a thrilling heist, but on the other hand, I wanted there to be this message of hope of how can we do better.
Right.
And so one of the dichotomies is like, they're stealing from this big, kind of evil corporation that's very exploitive. And so then, the question is, well, like, what could we do instead? Because you can't just get rid of something, you have to have a replacement.
Right.
And so in doing my research for this, I discovered this idea of worker-owned cooperatives, which is, everyone that works at a company, they get a portion of the profits back, and they have a say in how the company is run, which is this incredible idea of like, what if there wasn't like one billionaire at the top funneling like all of the money in the world into their like Swiss bank account?
Well, as you were saying that, I was actually thinking about another X for some reason. They're coming up in my mind and all along that line of this particular show. But this particular X was from Green Bay, a big fan of the Green Bay Packers. And if I remember correctly, the Green Bay Packers are actually owned by the entire town of Green Bay and everything like that. So they would be an example of what you're talking about, because the players get paid all that money. And there's, of course, the big owner. But I think, if I remember correctly, the whole city of Green Bay is also involved in ownership, which is probably why they have the fan base that they do.
That would be very cool. And yeah, there's actually a lot of examples of this working successfully. Like the Green Bay Packers, there's actually a lot of utility companies, for example, that are owned by the city. So rather than, Verizon having a monopoly over your home internet, many cities now are running their own internet company. And their prerogative is not, maximize shareholder profit. Their prerogative is give our residents the best quality internet for the lowest price. And just changing that like one line, changing that mission statement, that incentive structure, just so fundamentally shifts how you operate as an organization. And it works at a big scale too. There's a cooperative in Spain called Mondragon that they're billions of dollars a year in revenue. They're like one of the biggest companies in Spain, and it's entirely a worker-owned cooperative.
Oh, wow. I have to ask Nick about that because Nick just is the founder that I mentioned earlier and everything like that. But he's actually just recently moved with his wife to Spain. He actually moved with his wife and a dog, but the dog didn't like the move and passed away, unfortunately, and everything like that. But he did move to Spain. I think they've been there less than a year, but if they just recently moved there, so they were one of those expats that we hear people talking about all the time and everything like that. So he just recently moved there. Might be a little bit over a year, but he's one of the founders along with Kim Calhoun, who is in the engineering space and all along those lines. But one of the things that they talk about quite often, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, because if I'm hearing you correctly, and it's probably part of the reason that you did this particular book and all along those lines, is that a lot of the stuff that we're talking about on this particular episode are not talked about in the school system. So that's one of Nick and Kim's frustrations. They're thinking about it from the standpoint of fiscal literacy and all along those lines, and some other topics that they would like to hear talked about more. But I'm thinking climate change isn't talked that much as well. As a matter of fact, I was watching 60 Minutes and they had a exercise, a longevity guru, and he was talking about how he's got his physician degree, his medical degree, and everything like that. But he did not remember in college or in high school taking a course in nutrition, and definitely didn't remember taking a course in longevity and a number of other things that probably should be taught that aren't taught. So I just wanted your take on, are we doing enough in our education system, either higher ed or lower ed, to deal with these topics of climate and its impact, and what we can do better?
Yeah, I think education is a very challenging field. I'm so grateful for the teachers that we have, because, especially in the current government that's removing funding and creating it, making it more and more difficult to actually teach kids. It's hard work. And when I was making the electricity game Electrify, I was surprised to see, I created it as an educational tool. So I actually went to classrooms and like gave a little lecture on electricity, and then had the kids play the game. And now obviously the kids love it. How often do you get to play a game in school? But the game was extremely educational. So I think it was actually a great use of their time to give them this understanding of how something so fundamental to their world, how electricity and electricity grids works. So I think there's like a lot of ways that the world is changing, that maybe our education curriculums could be updated to include more of.
Yeah, they definitely could be updated. I noticed you also did some work in your career and in your life in the field that some people are, and you kind of alluded to it, even in the climate change, being afraid of, because they're afraid that they're going to come and take our jobs. And I'm not talking about immigration, but I'm talking about the robots. So I just wanted your take on this, because you are a fifth-year scholar apparently in robotics and urban design, and you got a lot of folks that are looking at some of our restaurants and are afraid that eventually they'll go to the restaurant, and instead of having a human server, they'll have a robot server or a robot waiter. Kind of reminds me of the robot from the Jetsons, because I'm of that age that I remember the Jetsons and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on where we are with the robotics, and is it something that folks should be fearful of the way that some people are?
It's interesting. I studied robotics at Carnegie Mellon, and then now Tesla is also doing their Optimus humanoid robot. And it kind of reminds me of a good framework to think about any technology, not just robots. But people tend to overestimate how much change will happen in 5 years,
Right.
and underestimate how much change will happen in 20. So, we kind of tend to think, oh, like, we'll have flying cars in 5 years, and in 20 years, it'll be the same. Like, we'll just have the same thing. In reality, not too much is going to change in 5 years, but the amount of change that's going to happen in 20 years is almost incomprehensible. I think the iPhone came out in like 2006.
Right.
So it's like, it hasn't even been 20 years since the smartphone came out. There's no way that you could have predicted some of the crazy things that have happened, like TikTok, 20 years ago. And so, the same thing with humanoid robots. I think we're definitely more than 5 years away from a humanoid robot like doing a whole meal prep at a restaurant. But like in 20 years, this idea of like a abundant economy where robots are doing most of the work is like believable.
Yeah, I can see it being believable. Like I said, I remember the time when a computer took up entire rooms because I graduated at Marquette in the early 80s, and even as far back as the 80s and the 70s, you definitely had the big, massive computers, and you also had the floppy disk, which I don't even know if you can find a floppy disk now and everything like that unless you go to a museum and all along those lines. And I'm being slightly sarcastic because I'm sure there's still some floppy disks out there and everything like that. But it is definitely showing the advancement of the way that society has gone, to your point and everything. Just really quickly, because I was reading some of your letters of recommendation and everything. And once these things came up that I know a lot of people that watch this show and just watch Pod TV in general will be interested in, and all along those lines. And they've been interested in probably quite a few of the things we've been talking about. But a lot of people want to do a Kickstarter. They want to do a number of these various forms of raising money, and there are different ones. There's Kickstarter, and there are a number of other ones that are out there as well, GoFundMe, and a number of other ones as well. But I see that this lady, Monica Yope of Popcraft, was saying that they got some advice from you as to how to fine tune their campaign. So folks that are thinking that they want to do these funding campaigns, whether they've got an idea like you did for your stories, and I mean for your book as well as for some of the games, what advice would you give to folks that are wanting to find these kind of funding tools?
Yeah, so I've done a few crowdfunding campaigns. I did one back in college actually for that photography project with the kind of time traveling, and then I did Kickstarter for Expedition, the role playing card game. Uh, and yeah, it's been a really big learning experience. You know, the first Kickstarter I did raised $3,000, and by the end of doing them, I raised 100,000. And one of I'd say my biggest takeaway is probably just how profound quality makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
With the board game, we tried to be fast and quick and launch a Kickstarter, and we raised very little money, and we got this feedback of like, hey, if you took 6 more months, if you really like improved the quality of the cards, learned a bit more videography and shot a better video, it would be more successful. And it was, I think, in the first 3 days before and after, we raised 7 times as much money.
Wow.
And so I think quality has this almost like exponentially positive impact on whatever you're doing. Like a 10% boost in quality will yield a more than 10% increase in how successful that thing would be. And so, yeah, anyone looking to do a crowdfunding campaign or such, I'd recommend like to invest just that little bit of extra time, go like just a little bit above and beyond, and just make it as high quality as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that sounds like some very solid advice that a lot of times people don't do and everything like that. On this network and on this show, I've had a lot of people that have been surprised by basic things that they didn't have. So I was wondering, as one that probably didn't study business per se in terms of a degree and everything, how quickly did you get into having an understanding that you needed certain things that businesses need, whether that's a mission statement or whether that's a business plan or a number of these other things that are very basic, but a lot of times when you talk to people in business, they don't have them right away and everything like that. So I just wondered, how quickly was the learning curve for you that you realized that you needed that as well as needed certain people on your team, like an accountant and maybe a lawyer and some other folks that you probably needed on your team as well?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because it's also very easy to get caught up in these. You could have this idea, and then before doing anything else, you could spend thousands of dollars and frankly years of time perfecting your mission statement, hiring a good lawyer. You could do all that without even knowing if your business works or not.
Right.
And so my suggestion is to first and foremost figure out if it's a viable business before coming up with a mission statement or even before trying to launch a Kickstarter. The question is like, do I have a thing here that gets people excited, that people are willing to pay for? and really kind of testing and refining that as much as possible before. I guess there's like pre-market fit and post-market fit, and so you really want to like refine your market fit as much as possible with as little bureaucracy as possible, no mission statements, no lawyers, whatever. And then once you kind of hit this inflection point where you're like, I'm sure that people want this thing, then like, okay, it's time to get serious. It's time to hire the accountant and do a Kickstarter and all that. And with Expedition, for example, we did 100+ play tests where we had friends over, we invited strangers over, we went to different locations to get diverse groups of people where we just played the game with them. We took notes. We were like, are they enjoying it? What's working? What's not working? And so through that, we were able to really like focus on refining the concept, very low cost, very fast.
Yeah,
and then
that makes sense.
And then launch.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to bring in another person who's had to do a lot of that kind of work in their work as well. So we've got Deborah Muth, who is another guest here at the dinner party, and she's actually from an area that I know quite well, as I was alluding to earlier. Deb, it looks like you are working in Milwaukee in alternative medicine and all along those lines. And I actually went to Marquette, which is in Milwaukee, and that's where I became a Brewers fan. And I'm still regretting the fact that we didn't make it to the World Series, even though there's a great World Series going on between Toronto and the Dodgers and everything. But it looks like you're doing some work in women's regenerative medicine and all along those lines. And you're talking about how doctors can turn pain into purpose. So share a little bit about your story as well, because that's what the dinner party is. I invite different people on that don't know each other, and we just kind of like have a casual conversation and learn from each other.
Absolutely. Well, nice to meet you, Mark. Nice to see you, Todd. So yes, I am just outside of Milwaukee. I'm in Waukesha, Wisconsin, so about 20 minutes outside of Milwaukee. Been here my whole life. Been in the integrated medicine space for 27 years now. Learned very quickly that conventional medicine was not the space that I wanted to be in. So I run one of the largest practices for integrated medicine in the Midwest, and focusing a lot on women's health and women's regenerative medicine. So we see a lot of the patients that have been everywhere and no one's been able to fix them. We're known as the medical detective. So we kind of dive in and find their root cause and then create an individual treatment plan for each individual person. And we set it apart uniquely for each person. So there's no cookie cutter medicine here at all.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Deb, one of the things that I was talking about with Todd is this notion of maybe us thinking outside of the norm, because he's written a heist thriller that actually is addressing the climate change issue and all along those lines. And it looks like you're thinking outside of the box as well and everything like that. So I just wonder, how much is this notion of thinking outside of the box what helps you, Deb? And maybe even if you want to answer that as well, Todd, even though we've been having this conversation for a few minutes, but definitely I'd love to hear your notion of how thinking outside the box has helped you create these ideas even in women's health.
Absolutely. Since I've worked with so many patients that have seen so many doctors, like it's not unusual for them to come in here and have seen 15 or 20 doctors before they get to me. If I didn't think outside the box, they wouldn't be here, because they already had all the traditional workup. They've already ruled out everything traditionally. And so having to look at their lifestyle, where they live, what their exposures have been like. Have they lived around toxic dumps? Have they been in the military and traveled around? What kinds of things have they been exposed to environmentally that could be causing some of their issues? We really needed to start thinking outside the box and looking at, have you traveled outside of the country? Were you exposed to parasites or bugs or Lyme disease or any of those kinds of things? Is the house that you live in toxic? Could that possibly be the cause? And those are all things that traditional medicine just doesn't look at. We also have had to look at some different lab testing that people don't look at. We have some clients with a lot of neurological diseases, and the traditional MRI doesn't always fit the picture. It doesn't show us what we need. So we've had to go and say, okay, can you reset your MRI to calibrate for this so that we can look at what's going on in the cervical spine, or we can look at what's going on in the brain differently? Can we identify how many neurotransmitters they have in their brain, or if those neurotransmitters are getting to the brain? And a lot of times the traditional medicine system doesn't like us for that, because they have to change everything they're doing for one patient. But by doing that, it oftentimes gets the patient the answer that they've been looking for. Sometimes it's not what they wanted to hear, but it also often gets them the answer so that we can move forward and try to find a a treatment that'll work for them.
Yeah, Deborah and Todd, if you want to jump in, you can as well. How much is climate playing into our health and everything like that? Because I know that even here in North Carolina, there have been a number of people that have found that they were living in mold-infested places, whether that was in public housing or regular housing or even apartments and all along those lines. And of course, there's been definitely other environmental issues that are out there. You mentioned even people living near toxic dumps and things like that. That's one of the things I was talking about to Todd, is that I grew up in Warrenton, which is the home of the social justice movement and all, or some people call it the climate justice movement, because of the chemical dump that was done in that rural part of North Carolina as well as Virginia some almost 50 years ago, because it was like in the late 70s and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on how much the environment plays into our health.
Oh, I think it's huge. I don't think we give it enough respect for what it is. You know, the water's toxic, the air is toxic. These companies have their quote unquote accidental spills, and they dump all these toxic chemicals into our water supply system, into our ground. And then we think that, oh, it's not going to hurt anything. But a lot of those chemicals stick around for 100 years. And then we build on it, we grow on it, we do all these things on it. And I don't think we're taking that seriously enough at all. Mold is a huge issue for the majority of our patients. Probably 80% of our patients have either lived or worked into a building that had water damage that started their illness, suppressed their immune system, which then led them to develop all kinds of other problems. They get exposed to infections, which they can't clear. They develop something called mast cell activation syndrome, where their immune system doesn't function the way it's supposed to, and they start reacting to all kinds of things. It's a big issue. And I think it's going to be bigger. COVID has not helped that. It's made it a whole lot worse. Both the illness and the vaccine have just decimated so many people's lives. It's really sad.
Yeah, it sounds like it and everything. What's your take on that, Todd? Just the environment and how it's impacted, even in your own research with your book?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is absolutely a strong correlation to health, and you know, per that point about mold in buildings, I designed an energy efficient house in Pittsburgh, and it was interesting to learn how architecture and climate are connected. You know, we design our buildings for some expectation about how the climate is going to be. You know, we kind of know in Phoenix, Arizona, it's been like this historically, and in Boston, Massachusetts, it's like this. And so that's how we design buildings within that expectation. But as the climate's changing, we're going more and more outside of those expectations. And so you might design a building's, water moisture envelope for so much rain, such high humidity and temperature. But when we start going outside of that, the building's not going to be able to keep up. It wasn't designed for that. And so, yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah, it's definitely all connected. Deb, speaking of things that are all connected, I kind of alluded to it earlier when I was talking to Todd and everything. But when I was I'm in my 60s now, but I was in my, I think, 30s, or maybe it was around that age. That's when I was diagnosed with dysgraphia, which is like a form of dyslexia and everything like that. But I had already gone to through grade school, gone to college at Marquette, gotten a degree, a bachelor's in journalism and everything like that. And it was never diagnosed or even thought about being diagnosed during those times. And you had something similar where you were going through life and basically just missed it 28 years old when you sought an answer for your fatigue and everything like that. So what is it with our doctors that oftentimes, and even our own family, that they might see the symptoms or see what's going on, but they are ignoring it for whatever reasons and everything like that?
Yeah. Specifically too, for women, we know the dismissal rate for women is extremely high compared to men. Like, they'll wait 4 to 5 years to get an autoimmune diagnosis, longer than a man will. So there is a gender bias for sure, but I think part of it just has to do with our system in general. 10 minutes in an appointment is not enough time to get to know a person, hear their history, understand what's truly going on. Unfortunately, in medical school, doctors are taught that if a person complains of more than 3 symptoms, it's depression. So these people are getting labeled with depression and anxiety instead of truly being worked up for what's wrong. It's a somatic disorder. It's all in their head. So they're already against the 8 ball with some of that too. And it's really sad, because I think if we really took the time to get to know people and heard their story, their answers to all of their problems are in their story. You just have to know how to pull out and ask the right questions. And once you know what the questions are to ask and you listen for the answers, they already tell you what's the problem. Like a lot of our patients that come in, they want to limit their time with us and they want to put everything on paper. For me, I love to hear the story. I need to hear the story, because when I hear the story, it's like, okay, this happened here, this happened there, but what about this? What about that? It makes us think about all those different questions and all those different scenarios that could be causing problems. And it's different when you hear it versus seeing it on paper. And everything is becoming so electronic now that it's taking away from a lot of that connectedness with the person and the patient and the doctor.
Well, one of the things I was talking to Todd about, and I'd love to hear your take on it as well, is how much do you think that we're dependent on telemedicine and some of the other things? So one of the things I was talking to him about is this notion, because he's worked in robotics, of robots working in restaurants and all along those lines. But we're also hearing about a number of people that are looking for the day that we might not see a doctor, but we'll see a robot doing the medicine. And there are even robots doing certain medicine even now and everything like that. But I just wanted your take on this notion of the modern day of medicine.
Yeah, there's a lot more telemedicine on both sides. Doctors like to do it, patients like to do it. It's convenient. They can do it on their lunch hour. They can do it wherever. What we find, unfortunately, is a lot of people who do telemedicine are not engaged. I'll hop on a call with somebody. They're driving their kids to soccer. They've got 4 kids in the back. Everybody's yelling, screaming, talking. How is that person really engaging with what the doctor's saying, and what are they sharing? Are they being totally honest when they've got 4 kids in the back seat and they're trying to get to wherever they need to go? So I think there's a lot of things that get missed in that. They can't take notes. They can't pay attention. They can't ask the right questions. Certainly this idea of doing medicine through telemedicine as a dermatologist, it's crazy. Like, I'm not a dermatologist, but I can't look at somebody's skin and tell you if that skin lesion looks like a problem or not through a computer or through a phone. I need to touch it. I need to feel it. I need to shine a light through it. And those kinds of things are expected of us these days. And I don't think this is a good thing. I think for some things, they're fine. A common cold, common, sinus infection, something like that we don't have to look at somebody for, and we can diagnose without being right in person with them. Those things are fine. Consults where we're reviewing labs and we don't have to do a physical, great. But if I need to put my hands on somebody, I need to touch something, this communication is not working.
Hey, Dr. Muth, and everything along those same lines. I was watching, I mentioned to Todd earlier, 60 Minutes. They had different interesting pieces. One was on a mentalist, but there was a gentleman that's a longevity expert. I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's Adi or something like that. But one of the things that he was talking about was this notion of doing like a regular MRI on a regular basis, which sounds good for somebody like Elon Musk and those that can afford it and everything like that. But I just wanted your take on this notion of a lot of the medicine that we have is very expensive medicine. Like I said, it sounds great if you can get an MRI on a regular basis, but the average person that's working at, say, Walmart or Walgreens cannot afford a yearly mammogram. I mean, a yearly MRI. They can barely afford a yearly mammogram.
Right. I think it would be great. I don't understand why we don't focus more on prevention. What the insurance pays for an MRI is very different than what the hospital bills the insurance. They may bill $3,000 plus. The hospital's actually getting paid maybe $250, $300, and they don't discount that off to the patient who doesn't have insurance or doesn't have coverage. But at the end of the day, if we could do an MRI on somebody on an annual basis and pick up very minute changes, very early cancer detection, very early, anything, it would save the system so much money. We have an opportunity to test for cancer by a blood test that we've been waiting for approval on for over 15 years for insurance coverage. It costs $1,000 to do it. And it could save potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars if we caught it at stage 1 versus stage 4. Why hasn't Medicare, Medicaid, insurance companies picked this up yet? It doesn't make any sense. You have cancer societies backing this test and wanting it available, but yet our insurance system is saying no. This is ridiculous.
But isn't part of the problem, and I'm always going to get myself in trouble with some of my fellow North Carolinians and everything, is the power that the pharmaceutical companies have and everything like that. And I have friends that have worked for GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer and a number
Yep.
of the other ones here, because this is definitely a forefront area of the whole notion of research and everything like that. And those are just two of the companies. I mean, I could also mention Bristol Myers, that I think has offices here, and there are a number of others as well. But they do seem to have a significant amount of clout in the government. It doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican that's in charge and everything.
Yeah, very, very big lobbyists with very big pockets, you know. And we have to understand our healthcare system is a for-profit system. I don't have a problem with a for-profit system as long as you're not raping people for healthcare costs. You know, yes, I understand you have to pay your shareholders. Yes, I understand we have to have funding for research and all of those kinds of things. But we also don't have to charge $10,000 for something that the insurance is going to reimburse $500 for. And then the person that doesn't have insurance still pays $10,000. That's ridiculous. It doesn't have to have the costs attached to this. We have huge write-offs in order for them to continue to be not-for-profit organizations and not-for-profit hospitals. But that's only because they have these huge write-off amounts. And the CEOs are still making multiple figures in their pocketbook, when we could do things very differently. We could set up a system that provides a reimbursement based on outcomes, not based on the number of tests we do, which would significantly reduce the cost of healthcare to everybody and give everybody better outcomes in the long run. And it would save everybody money.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that one of the things that you talk about on one of your pages and everything is this notion of being a dedicated medical detective and all along those lines. So what in your mind is a medical detective and everything like that? Because I don't hear many doctors describe themselves that way, but that's one of the ways you describe yourself.
Yeah. So I think being a medical detective is really important. It's the notion of setting everything aside that we've learned and trying to unlearn what we've learned, and then always learning new things, but always looking for the answer. Like, I will tell a patient, I will not give up on you until we find the answer. The answer may not be black and white. It may not be right in front of us the way we think it is. It may take us a little bit to figure it out, but I will not give up. I will keep searching until we find the answer and find the solution to the problem. Again, sometimes that doesn't mean I can't make everybody 100% better, but my goal is to make somebody 70 to 80% better. And if we keep looking for the right answers, we'll find the answers, which then will give us the tools to fix the problem.
And one of your other websites, you describe yourself as a vibrant female. And I imagine there can be a version of a vibrant male as well. So what is a vibrant female, and how important is it for us to understand our food situation as well? Because I know that's something that you also talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think being a vibrant female or being a vibrant male is really owning who you are, understanding that men and women are very different. It's okay to be feminine. It's okay to be masculine. I can be in a man's world and I can run multiple businesses, but I don't have to take on the masculine energy to do that. I can stay in my feminine power and still run a business and still be successful and not be pushed over. And I feel the same thing with male energy. I don't think men have to always become softer in order to communicate or connect with who they are. I think it's about being who we are and being true to ourselves as men and as women, and being the best version of that we can be.
Really quickly, and this is for both of you and everything, how do you do that balance of work-life balance and everything like that? Child of a certain age and a little bit younger than both of us and everything, but I'm going like Deb. I would never have guessed that you're a wife of 35 years, a mother of 3, and a grandmother of 4. But it's based on this conversation and everything. But you've also got a farm in Wisconsin, which has got a certain amount of fruit. I'm not sure what fruit they are and everything like that. But how do you do that work balance thing that so many people are trying to figure out how to do?
Yeah, Todd, I'll let you go first on that one.
Oh, that's a big one. You know, when I was younger, I subscribed to the FIRE mentality, financial independence, retire early. And the whole mentality of that group was like, work your ass off, save a bunch of money, and then you don't have to work. Mm-hmm. And what I realized as I started getting into the climate movement was, you know, okay, even if you have enough money where you didn't need to work, you would still want to do something with your life. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit ridiculous to I don't know, it'd be quite silly to like, retire when you're 30 or something and then just like spend the next 60 years in the Bahamas. Like we have an innate need to have meaning and purpose and connection in our life that comes in part from work. And so then my mentality shifted to working on things that I care about where it doesn't really feel like work. Like, yes, writing this book was 2 years of work, but it was like deeply engaging, creative work. And I literally did it without receiving money. I lost money in the book. Books are a terrible way to try and make money. But the point is, for me at least, work-life balance is like, stop thinking about work as this like thing that you hate that you're trying to minimize, and start thinking about it as like a holistic part of what brings you passion and joy in your life.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely want to hear from you, Deb, about this work-life balance. But as you were just saying that, Todd, I was thinking that most of the people that I know that are retired, that are successful, are just what you said, that they are still engaged in something, even though they might have retired from the corporate world. I mean, my dad retired as a professor from UNC a number of years ago and everything, but he is still a very avid artist, and he does a lot of work in photography and gourd design and a number of other art forms and everything like that. And his lady love, because he's been with her longer than he was with my mom and everything like that, is still avid in her dancing. And she's dad's 83, so I think she's well into like her late 70s or something like that. She might even be pushing near 80 herself and everything like that. But she's still very much engaged. And even my mom, who doesn't necessarily have those kind of hobbies or interests, is still the matriarch of the family. So a lot of times people are still coming to her in that matriarch role. So she's still engaged in the community, even if she's not working a job, because she was she ran a major trust fund here in North Carolina for several years and everything, and has been retired now for about 10 and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on this notion that like Todd was saying, that you got to stop working even that you have to stop being engaged even after you stop working.
Yeah, I agree a lot with Todd. I think whatever you do should not feel like work. You should love what you do so it doesn't feel like work. I am difficult. I'm a difficult person for work-life balance because I love what I do. So because I love it, it doesn't feel like work. I don't really ever not do it. I'm always reading things about healthcare, or I'm watching things, or I'm learning things. I have very little downtime to just sit and watch a movie. That doesn't engage me. I don't like that. I do it from time to time, but it's not what feeds my brain. And I know not everyone is like that, and that's okay. But I think the idea of retirement is a poor idea for most of us, because without a purpose, what do we have to be here for? And as we age and we mature, we have so much knowledge and so much insight. And we need to share that with the world. We need to share that with people that are either younger than us or just in a different place than we are, to help them along so that they don't have to live the trials and tribulations that we learned the hard way. There's always someone we could share our knowledge with. So I really think it's important. You need to have downtime, right? You can't work 25 hours a day and not have any downtime. But you have to find that balance. Like, if you work 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day, what are you doing with the rest of your time? If you're just sitting on your phone and brainlessly scrolling Facebook or whatever the greatest social media option is these days, that's not a really great use of our time. Now, if we're scrolling and we're engaging and we're sharing and we're contributing, that's a different story, but I really think that we need to find a place to give back to the world, to make the world a better place, leave it better than what we found it. That's why I farm. That's why I grow fruit. I have a fruit orchard that I love. So I have a whole variety, peaches, apples, pears, hazelnuts, all kinds of things like that. I want to give back to my environment. I want to grow things that allow the animals to grow, to get the bees to pollinate. All of those things I do as a result of that. And as a plus side, it feeds some people some great fresh fruit, and it's a great time for me to be out in nature. And I love that. And it doesn't feel like work at all. And that's what I think life is about.
Dr. Mills, what advice would you give to people that are facing these issues, but also dealing with chronic illnesses and all along those lines? Because I'd like to I think I mentioned to you in one of our letters back and forth that I lost a aunt to MS, and definitely have another relative that's got it right now and everything
Mhm.
like that. So, what is your take on folks that are doing and fighting a disease that is definitely terminal, but it doesn't have to be like a well, I mean, we're all going to die at some point, but it had to be
Right.
like an immediate death sentence.
Yeah. We're all dying from the moment we take our first breath, right? It's just a matter of how many breaths we get. Um, I think when people have a chronic illness, they're challenged for sure. And sometimes they're limited in what they can do, but that doesn't mean they can't do anything. They shouldn't give up. In 2022, I was told I had MS and I did not have MS, but I was told I had MS because of a brain scan, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. So I always tell people when you get a diagnosis of a chronic illness or a terminal diagnosis like that, you want to get a second opinion, even maybe a third opinion. And that's where you really want to start looking at integrative medicine along with your conventional medicine, because there are a lot of things that we can do in integrative medicine that conventional medicine is not allowed to do and they don't know about, that can make your life better, make the quality of your life better, and sometimes actually reverse the disease itself. I was able to completely reverse my white matter brain disease. I was able to grow my gray matter of my brain by 2 standard deviations in about 18 months. These things can happen, but you're not going to hear about those things happening in conventional medicine, unfortunately. So I always tell people, don't give up, keep working, keep doing what you can do. Even though you might have some physical limitations, that doesn't mean that you can't contribute in a different way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything along those lines. How about the food that we eat? Because a lot of times we also
Mm.
hear people talking about how bad the food is and all along those lines. And sometimes people are paying attention, but even when they go to the quote unquote more healthy food areas, they are also sometimes the most expensive. That's the reason
Yeah.
they're called Whole Foods, Whole Paycheck,
Mhm.
and everything
Yeah.
along those lines, which is one of its joke nicknames.
Yeah, our food source is really not good these days. You know, we haven't rotated our soils and we don't add back enough nutrition to our soils in our conventional farming practices. You're better off buying at a farmer's market, buying directly from a farmer where you can talk to them about how they're growing, what they're doing to their soil, how they're preparing. Unfortunately, all of our seeds come from Monsanto. They've cornered the market on that, which means all of them contain Roundup unless you have organic seeds that by chance you were able to get. And they are trying to make that harder and harder for people to access organic seeds these days. Um, you really want to look for when you're buying things. If you can buy it natural, buy it organic. It doesn't mean it's 100% organic. They can still use some pesticides and herbicides on their products, but it's a limited amount. You want to look for a label that says A peel, A, and then the word peel, Peel. That is a really bad product. That is Bill Gates' product. It's now being removed from the market in Europe. We're trying to remove it here in the US, and it looks like it's going to happen, but it's still a couple of years away before that won't be available to us. These are genetically modified things. These are things that are not real food. It's really not good for us. All of our fast foods are really terrible for us. You want to try to eat whole foods, things that are grown, things that are natural, things that are not adulterated. That's where you want to get most of your food from, but that is an expensive product, right? It's much easier to buy a bag of Cheetos. It's cheaper than it is to go and get a bunch of fresh fruit or fresh vegetables. And if you have to feed a lot of people, it's easier and cheaper to do that. But you're going to pay on the front end or you're going to pay on the back end. Either you feed your body what it needs and you pay up front and do that, or you're going to pay on the back end with a disease, one of the two.
Yeah, isn't part of the problem though that we live in this fast-paced society where everything is quickness and all along those lines? Because I can tell you that earlier today, and I'll just admit it, I ordered some DoorDash, and it was from one of those fast food restaurants and all along those lines because it was one of those days where I was being busy here on Pod TV and other things, and
Mhm.
didn't have necessarily what I wanted in the house and everything along those lines. So I do know that sometimes people are doing that, and then the other thing that happens on the flip side of that is that sometimes people hear certain words and they associate them with a certain time of the past. Because like I said, I saw that you were a herbalist, and I know what that means because I've got some friends that were definitely into nature, and even family members that were, including my mom and dad, that were into nature and knew what poke salad was and a number of other things that are natural here in the South. But sometimes people think of herbs and they automatically think of certain herbs that exist in the pot community, but they also think of like the 60s and the 70s and don't necessarily think of the more modern herbs that can be very healthy for you.
That is very true. And people can grow herbs on their own. They can grow it on a porch. It doesn't need to be grown in a big field. You can grow them and pick them and cook them and eat them. And we do live in a fast-paced society, and it is easier to just, order up Domino's or order up whatever. But at the end of the day, it's just as easy to take an afternoon and food prep and put it in the freezer. And then when you don't have anything, you just pull it out and you warm it up and you eat it. And then you've got a healthy meal. The sad thing is, I think the art of cooking, the art of preparing food has gotten lost a couple of generations ago. A lot of people don't know how to cook. They don't like it. They're not good at it. It's too complicated. And we need to go back to that. We need to go back to cooking meals and having mealtime with our families and making that a special time for us. We do better as a family. We do better as a culture. Our bodies do better that way. And the more we can do that, the better off the society is going to be.
But this is part of the problem, and this is for both you and Todd, is that we've gotten so dependent on communications and some of the technology. Because I can tell you that even if I've gone to some of the local area restaurants, I run into families that are not having that family time that you're talking about. Like I know when I go to see mom on Thanksgiving, we'll probably pull out spinners, which is like dominoes. It's a game where we might pull out Scrabble, and we'll have that family time of family competition and some fun enjoyment and everything, in addition to watching the football games of that day, because there's usually an NFL game on and everything along those lines. But I do know that a lot of times when I go out, I see people that are literally on their cell phones and having conversations with everybody but the people that are directly in front of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of a conversation I was having with my 9-year-old niece recently, who was trying to get into cooking. And she was like, but I don't enjoy cooking. And I'm like, well, maybe part of it is that since you don't know how to cook and it's not always pleasant to do things that you're not good at, like you might start to enjoy it more as you practice it. But the other thing is also like being selective about what we choose to enjoy, because there's not like a single objective truth to what is enjoyable. Some people enjoy skydiving, others don't. Some people enjoy cooking, others don't. And I think there's a certain intentionality to like trying to find the joyful things. You could look at cooking as like, oh God, I have to go to the grocery store. I have to like wash all this fruit. Or you could be like, I get to like go to the store and see what's new. And then like when I'm chopping things, I get to enjoy the flavors. So there's like a degree of mindfulness of like, this is a thing that's valuable to me and I'm going to find a way to enjoy it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Everything. I definitely want to hear your thoughts around that, Deb. But just in that same space, I've started doing more cooking lately just because my aunt has been bringing me some food that she's gotten from one of the like the church group that gives out food and all along those lines. So she'll stop by and she knows that I may not have enough in the refrigerator. So she'll supply something usually on a Friday. Lately it's been just about every Friday and everything that she'll drop something off. So I've found myself cooking things that I didn't even know that I knew how to cook. But when I was young and a teenager, I think, or maybe a preteen, my brother is actually a great cook. And part of the reason he's a great cook is because I'm a great reader and a great talker and all of those things. So at a very young age, he picked up the cookbook in my parents' kitchen and handed it to me and had me read it to him. And therefore, that's why he's a good cook. I mean, I'm becoming better and I'm pretty good at what I do and everything like that. But we developed those skills at a very young age, because I think I was like, I think he was maybe 3 or 4. So, and there's a 7-year gap between us. So he was probably like 11. I mean, I was probably 11 at the time. So if he was 4 or 5, I was 11 or 12.
I think there's a lot to do with that, with technology. It breaks my heart to see families eating out and all the kids are on their tablet, the parents are on their cell phones, and they're all at the restaurant together. And that's just sad because it's not teaching kids to sit at a restaurant without being entertained. If the parents can't sit at a meal and sit with their kids without being entertained, without being bothered by each other, that's a sad time. It's sad to see that we've gotten to the place where human connection comes from this thing, the cell phone and the computer, and not from spending time with people that matter to us. And I get that families are busy and all of that, but this is your family. This is the time you're supposed to be talking about the day, sharing what's happened, sharing what's going on with your kids and what's happening in their life and those kinds of things. And when we're ignoring that and we're ignoring each other, it's, to me, it's setting our community and our society up for a demise that is, we're really going to regret in 5 more years, because the young people don't know how to communicate properly with each other. They don't know how to have a conversation. They don't know how to have confrontation with each other. They only know how to do it through electronic means. And that is a real problem. And we see it in the young people that we hire in our office. We see it everywhere we go. It's really sad, but we need to take these things out of our lives for a while and start connecting with people again.
That makes sense. Dr. Deb, there's an issue that you talk about, and we'll get ready to wrap up in about 15, 20 minutes and everything, but you talk about regularly and everything along those lines that I've been hearing more about in the news than I used to hear about and everything. Why are we having an increase in fibromyalgia and thyroid problems? And that's in both men and women, because I've been hearing more and more people complain about that than I remember as a youngster. And maybe they were talking about it and I just didn't catch it because I was a youngster and everything like that.
It's definitely been around for a long time. It has escalated. A lot of it has to do with the 85,000 chemicals we have in our environment that we never used to have. That's a problem, a big problem for our thyroid glands. It's a big problem for our bodies in general. The electromagnetic field that we're being exposed to, the EMFs, the 5Gs, those things are creating a lot of problems for people in their bodies. They don't always recognize that's what the problem is. So everything that we have on Wi-Fi, that's all energy. And when we look at our bodies are energetic beings. We're just having a physical experience here. And we ignore all of this 5G, EMF, towers everywhere. We want convenience, but it's taking a toll on our bodies, very much so. And we've got to figure out if we're going to say, stop, we're not going to do this anymore. We don't need convenience like this. We can take a little less convenience for a lot more health, and people have to start making those choices.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things we've been talking about on this network and everything, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts around this because I've had different answers from different folks and everything, is this notion, because most of y'all are very confident individuals, and that's what I love, having confident individuals on the show, and for the most part have had that and everything. But a lot of times people are hearing this notion of the imposter syndrome and not being as confident as they should be. I know that in my own life, I have not gone for jobs, and even at 60s, not gone for certain relationships and all along those lines because I was too busy talking myself out of them and everything like that, whether it was the job or the relationship. So how do you deal with that, and what advice do you give to people that are not being as confident as they probably should be? Because that's basically what the imposter syndrome is the belief that you're not as good as you think, as others may think you are, and everything like that.
Todd, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. Yeah, it's totally a thing. I still get imposter syndrome pretty regularly. I don't think it ever goes away. But I think it's actually a reframing that I've had for myself is that kind of anxiety, that fear of like, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't, is actually a signal to lean in. If you're afraid of something, sometimes it's like, okay, legit, there's a tiger outside, maybe don't go outside. That doesn't happen that much anymore. But if you're afraid of something, but you're also excited for it, like that kind of combination of fear and excitement is, I've been training myself, like that actually means go for it, because it means I'm pushing myself.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Dr. Muth?
Yeah, I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome. I know I do as well. I think social media makes that a little bit more heightened for us too, because we see all these people doing amazing things and they make it look so easy. And oftentimes people aren't telling you all the failures they've had before they've gotten to one success, and they don't tell you how hard it's been. It'd be nice to see everybody's real story and their challenges on how they got where they've gotten. But I think too, I agree with Todd, like when you get nervous about something, we have to lean in and ask ourselves why we're really nervous. I oftentimes, want to put something out there and then I'm like, if I put that out there, somebody may think this about me, or somebody may question that about me, or they're not going to trust me here. And at the end of the day, does it really matter if the whole world trusts you or believes you or thinks anything of you anyway? But I mean, we all think that, but in the world of how many billions of people, does that one person that's going to be negative to us really matter that much? And unfortunately it does, because if you have 20 people saying great things about you and the one person says something negative about you, where do we focus our attention? We always focus it on that negative person. How can I win that person over? When we should be focusing on the 20 people that think what you did or said was amazing and made a huge impact for them. And I often will tell people, you know what? All you have to do is connect or influence with one person. Have whatever you have to say affect one person's life, and you will be surprised the ripple effect that it makes in that person. And by holding it back, you're doing a disservice to the one person you could have helped. It's not about the many, it's about the one.
Yeah, the one that you could have helped and everything like that. But how do you know your worth? Because I've got a good friend of mine, and we oftentimes talk about the notion, and I'll start with you, Todd, but I definitely want to hear from you, Deb, as well, of our own worth. Because a lot of times we don't understand our own worth, and sometimes we undercharge or don't charge at all and everything like that. I know that my good friend Ray Pascal, who is a event planner like I am, that's one of my other jobs and everything like that, and he's also a event consultant and an event technician, because like he helps put on the events in a lot of various ways and everything like that. But he talks about what he calls the brain drain, which is a lot of people that want to get the advice for free or get the service for free, but don't want to necessarily give you any sort of compensation and everything like that. So how do you avoid the brain drain in general? Because it impacts medicine, because I'm sure people are constantly asking you for free medical advice, and I'm sure people at Todd are asking you for free advice about business and even the climate and everything like that. So how do you avoid what my friend Ray calls the brain drain?
That went in a very different direction than I was expecting. I was expecting like personal self-worth, but yeah, I mean, financial worth is interesting. I find that especially in this kind of like consulting type situations, people tend to really undercharge. You know, if you're doing like kind of a salaried position, there's pretty like you can look at the market and kind of see what that role is worth. But in these cases where it's like, you know, I want you for like 1 hour, people tend to think of it in the same way that they think of a salaried job. Like if someone doing this on a salary earns $30 an hour, I should charge $30 an hour for consulting. But what I have advised friends in this position and try to do for myself is to double what you would consider normal for a salaried, because there's so many other kind of costs that go along with doing it as a one-off thing. You know, you have to account for the time around it and the instability of that revenue versus, you know, doing it for 8 hours a day. I always remember, I think it was Thomas Edison who was like, you know, this client's upset at me for charging like $10,000 to fix something when I just like walked up and like hit it with a hammer and it worked. And he was like, yeah, you know, I charged you like $1 an hour to like hit it with a hammer, and I charged you the other $9,000 to know where to hit the hammer.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. It's interesting you said that, because we've been having that conversation with my cultural arts center and all along those lines, because there are there's two history tours, one that is done by an outside group and everything like that, and they charge in the multiple $100s and everything along those lines. And then we're thinking about doing one as well that won't be as detailed, because there's more of a theatrical kind of presentation and all along those lines. But we've been contemplating the cost and everything like that, and there are some people that are like a few $100s is too much, and there are others that are like, hey, but it's your time. To your point, Todd, it's your time. It's the fact that you got to know this history component that you're talking about and all along those lines. So you need to pay something that comparable. You might not want to charge the maximum amount, but you do want to charge something that is a fair amount. You also don't want to be too cheap for yourself. So I think we're going to probably settle somewhere in the middle, like a $100 or $150 range or something like that, but maybe not necessarily the $500 range that the more theatrical presentation does.
Yeah. I agree with you, Todd. I think people underestimate themselves quite a bit, and they want to undercharge, especially when they're starting out, because they want to attract clients, and they think if they charge less, they'll attract clients. I tell the colleagues that I teach as well, what type of client do you want to attract? Do you want to attract bargain client, the one that's looking for the deal, that's going to nickel and dime you for everything that you do? Or do you want to attract the client that's ready to invest in themselves and they respect your knowledge and your time for helping them along the way? Because either way, you're going to do the same amount of work, but I will guarantee you, you are going to work 10 times harder for the client that is not wanting to pay you a lot of money. And the client that's paying you a lot of money, you will not work as hard for, because they will actually work for themselves as well. And it's really a challenge sometimes to get people to understand that. I think we all want to serve, and we all want to share our knowledge and information with as many people as we can. But at the end of the day, our businesses cost us money. It costs me money to have a team of people that can help my clients. They don't come for free. They want a nice salary. They want great benefits. They want all of the things that everybody else offers to them to work as well. And if I have a bunch of people that work for me and I'm paying them hardly anything, is that going to be the person that you want to serve your clients? And at the end of the day, it usually isn't, because those people don't care about what they're doing if they're not making much money. I wouldn't. If I was getting paid $10 an hour to do a very high level job, would I give 110%? No. But if I'm paying that employee $30, you're darn right I'm going to give you 150% then to your clients, because I'm being compensated for what I do and what I bring to the table. And I think people have to look at that. It's what kind of service you want to really deliver. And you can always deliver free services to people who can't afford it. You can do podcasts like this. You can write books. You can do Facebook Lives. You can put information out on social media. You can give away free booklets and things like that on your website. There's all kinds of things that we can do to help those people who can't afford your services to get the same type of thing that they're looking for. But at the end of the day, you have to really value yourself and your team and be willing to charge what you're worth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But the other thing that goes on, and this probably is going another direction that you're expecting, Todd, and all along those lines, is what do you do with those people that are the opposite of the ones that I'm talking about, that are the brain drain folks? But you also got people that are wanting you more involved in their mission than you are involved in your own mission. I call them the dream stealers and all along those lines. So Todd, I'm imagining there have probably been people that had other businesses other than your businesses that you've done, but they wanted you to buy into their vision and not necessarily see how your own vision played into their vision. So have you faced that, and how have you dealt with that, where people wanted to pull you into their vision?
I'll need to think on this a bit. Maybe you go first, Ed.
Okay. Yeah, it's very easy for people to look at what you've done and see your knowledge and see your expertise and think, all I have to do is tap into that person's knowledge and expertise, bring them into my team and copy what they've done. And I'm going to have an amazing business by doing that. Well, that's not always the case. And I've had a lot of people who've asked me to partner with them and do things with them. And at the end of the day, it doesn't serve my initial mission that I wanted to do. And now I'm being distracted from what I should be doing because I'm giving this person all the attention. And at the end of the day, that person that wants your attention really doesn't want to compensate you for it anyway. They just want to tap into your brain. And they want to skip to the head of the line. They don't want to do all the work. They don't want to do all the things that they need to do. They want to tap into your brain, have you tap into their business, make their business great, and take all the energy from that. I'm willing to help people, but I am not willing to do all the work for them. I'll give you knowledge, I'll share it, but you got to show me on your side that you're going to put some effort into it. If you put some effort into it, I'll put more effort into it. If you're not putting forth any effort and you're just tapping into my knowledge base, I'm not willing to give you my energy anymore then.
Yeah, that makes sense. Todd, just to put it in a different context, there have been, even to the point of your book about corporate espionage and corporate sabotage and everything, there have been a number of cases, and I can't think of them right now and everything, where later after the research was done, we found out that the person that is the face of the organization was not the person that created the idea and everything like that. So that's kind of what I was talking about. It's like the people that are like not, they are seen as the face of the organization, whether that's in the computer world or other worlds and everything like that. But then if you do a deeper dive, you find out that they weren't the person that was the brainchild. And that's what I meant by stealing the ideas.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Tesla's a famous case. I think it was like Martin Eberhard founded it, and then Elon kind of funded it and has become the chair. And I mean, on one hand, I think erasing history like that is not cool. And also, different people have different skills, and very few people have both the like technical skills to like invent something and the social selling skills to be the face of an organization. And so I think it's actually quite healthy to recognize that those are different people, and like that's the inventor, that's the person who now runs the business. As long as people are acknowledged and given credit for that.
Somebody has to be the visionary, right? And visionaries are usually not good operators. They're visionaries. They're up here loving everything, but they're not the person that puts pen to paper to make it all happen and coordinates everything and makes sure that they have the right team in place to get the product to market. So like you said, Todd, as long as you're giving credit where credit is due and it's a team effort and you're not just stealing someone's idea, that's a great thing.
No, and I would agree with you that there are visionaries, and not everybody is a visionary. And so you do have people that are visionaries. Where I have the frustration is where the visionaries don't acknowledge the people that were the founders or some of the other people. I mean, we even see that in certain history things as well. So where people are not acknowledged for being the founders of a movement and everything along those lines. I mean, if I was to even use, and I know that both of y'all are from the European American background, but I primarily African American, even though I have some Native American ancestry and some other bloodlines that flow through me and everything like that. And there have been a number of cases where there have been, later we found that they were Black inventors, but they were somebody else that got the credit. I mean, there's a famous case around the North Pole as to who actually got to the North Pole first, whether it was the one that is given the credit or whether it was the Black person that was going with him and everything like that. So there have been a number of those kind of cases. And that's where I have a issue when they're not, where they kind of like, erase people from history. So that's my issue in those cases when it happens, but it doesn't happen all the time. But I've even had friends of mine that have wanted me to go into business, and they've even been in the same ethnic community as me, and then they wanted me to be kind of like the face of the organization or the person in the organization, but they really wanted me to buy into their vision and not necessarily go into my own vision of where I want to go and everything like that. So that's the other problem that I have with it, where people kind of like want to kidnap your dreams and make it their dreams, make their dreams your dreams.
Yeah, I think you need to stay true to yourself in things, you truly do. There's a lot of patent theft out there, a lot of people that steal each other's ideas, especially back in the day. I know my husband's grandfather had invented what we know as a blinker these days on the cars. And his idea was stolen. It was patented by somebody else, and he never was compensated for that kind of idea. But a lot of things like that happened back in the day, and they still happen today. Different countries steal our ideas. They steal our intellectual property. You could be working with somebody alongside of them that you trust, and they steal your intellectual property and go and produce something that you might not have ever produced with it, but it was your idea in the first place. And those things happen, and all you can do is try to protect yourself as best you can. And I always look at it and say, you know what? The universe, our creator, provides for us what we're supposed to do. And it was either meant for you to do it or it was not. But if it was not, it's because something else was bigger. Something else was in need of your time and your energy and your focus. And you can't always look at it as a negative thing. We have to look at it from a positive aspect too.
No, that makes a lot of sense looking at it from a positive aspect. And like you were saying, I got a number of friends that are in the film and movie and music industry. And we know that there have been tons of cases of things that have been stolen from the various folks in those industries, whether it was a story idea or a film idea or a number of other ideas. And then they're looking up there and going like, I could have swore that I wrote that movie or that I had a similar like movie. And then they can either try to pursue it or not pursue it in terms of the legal ramifications and everything like that. Like I said, you're going to wrap up. Can I try to wrap up by the 6 o'clock hour and everything like that? But I did have a couple of quick questions and everything for everybody and all along those lines. One, and some of these are lighthearted questions, but Dr. Muse, were you rooting for the Brewers like I was? And if so, were you as disappointed as I was and everything along those lines? Because I was definitely hoping that they were going to win, and I was not a happy camper. Or are you not a baseball fan?
I am not a sports fan. Of course, I would always love to see Wisconsin sports people win, but I am not a sports fan, so I don't really root for any of them, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. But like I said, I only root for two from the Milwaukee area. I do follow my Marquette Golden Eagles. They were the Warriors when I was there and everything like that. And they've had some success, and they definitely have had some successful players like Tyler Kolek and Oso and a number of others that are doing well in the NBA, and we'll see what the new crop does in the NBA in this season and all along those lines. But yeah, I do follow some of those. One of the things that I was talking to Todd about earlier was because book deals with this whole notion of surfing a hurricane, and I was talking about things that I was not going to do because I was not going to skydive because I had an ex-girlfriend that wanted me to skydive, and I just was not feeling it and all along those lines. So I just wanted you yourself, what are some extreme things that you have tried or that you want to try and everything like that? So Dr. Muse, what are some of the extreme things that you've tried or thought about trying that you have still on that bucket list?
So I am terrified of heights, but I actually zip lined in Costa Rica, as scared as I was to do it, but it was one of the most amazing things that I ever did. So that is, challenge. I try to challenge myself when I have fears whenever I can. But I love to try new things. I love to travel. I love to try new things but heights are definitely one of those that are out there. I'm with you. I don't think I could jump out of a plane. Just not going to happen. I can't do that one. As much as I would like to think it would happen, it's not going to happen on my bucket list. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's going to happen on mine either. Todd, you mentioned that you did try the skydiving. What else is on that bucket list that you haven't tried yet that is still on your bucket list?
Yeah, so I am also afraid of heights. I skydived once to cross it off my bucket list, and the instructor literally had to kick me out of the plane, and I was screaming for the first solid minute. So glad I did it in hindsight. That's actually an interesting question. And, I think the kind of social media response would be like, oh, yeah, travel or whatnot. But thinking of that kind of honest vulnerability that we were talking about earlier, now that I finished my book, I'm in kind of like a creative slump of trying to actually figure out what I want to do next.
Well, you mentioned that you might want to do a movie, so maybe you'll do the movie yourself. It's like you did the book yourself, so maybe it's that you do the movie yourself as well. But it is a heist movie, so that might be a little bit more expensive venture than you want to try. But you did raise a successful Kickstarter, so maybe instead of a $10,000 or $100,000 Kickstarter, it's $1 million Kickstarter. So because I know movies are not exactly cheap, but then again, it was Blair Witch Project, which was done on a shoestring budget and was a horror film. So maybe there's a way to do it in a shoestring version.
We always have AI.
I kind of personally opposed to using AI for creative projects, but
is that because you feel that they take away from the creativity?
It's more so that the way that they were founded. I think using AI as like a creativity enhancing tool, like as of itself, as a technology, that's fine. But because of the way that they made these models by, stealing artists' work without compensation, I choose to not financially support organizations that have committed this theft. There's actually some crazy cases happening in court right now where the AI companies are being sued for literally billions of dollars for like mass scraping without permission.
Yeah, I think I've heard of some of those, like some involving musicians and even some involving actors, because I know there's that big actor strike, and part of that was what you're talking about, is this notion of AI using the images and all along those lines, even though they didn't have the permission to use it from famous movies and everything like that. So yeah, I've definitely heard about those cases, so I can understand that fear, and even in the university setting. So Dr. Muse, what's your take on that? Because I know even on the university setting that a lot of people are concerned about the students using AI too much, whether it's ChatGPT or a number of other things.
Yeah, I teach for one of the naturopathic schools in Indiana, and it's interesting to see the students. You can tell when students present assignments that are done by AI. I even see a lot more in my employees that I'm hiring, people that I'm interviewing, and I challenge them a little bit and I give them a little project and they give me back an AI project. And then when I talk to them about it, they have no idea what they submitted because they just did it with AI for, as quick as they could. And they submitted it to get the project done. And they never thought anybody was going to ask them about the project. And how are you going to do this? How are you going to accomplish this? And they're like, what are you talking about? They have absolutely no clue what they submitted. And I think there are some concerns around that, I've unfortunately made some hires of some people that I thought were amazing because of everything they've presented, and then only found out all of it was done by AI, and they never had any skills or intentions or anything to be able to do what I wanted them to do and needed them to do. And I think, unfortunately, our students are going to end up doing the same thing. Their kids are going to figure this out, how to give all their assignments in, get really great grades, but they really haven't learned anything. And then they're going to get out into the world, and we're going to have to teach them all over again because they never learned anything in the first place. And that's the sad part of it all.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you've run across AI resumes? Because that's what it sounds like you're talking about.
AI resumes and AI-driven projects. So I recently hired a business development person, and I gave them a project before I hired them and said, I want you to put together like a 90-day plan of show me how you're going to improve the business. What are you going to employ? How are you going to do that? What's it going to look like? And I got back this amazing page, what they were going to do. And it was a little aggressive. Like, we're going to grow your business by 15% in 90 days. And I thought, well, that's a little aggressive. I get that. And maybe you're just an aggressive person. But at the end of the day, it was completely AI driven. The whole thing. And when we finally hired her and we had conversations about it, and I kept bringing it back up to her, she kept looking at me like this blank slate, like, what are you talking about? And I pulled the paper out and I'm like, you submitted this plan to me. This was the plan we were working off of. She's like, I didn't create that. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, unfortunately, with people.
Yeah, you worked in that field, Todd. Are you running into that as well, where there's like these AI creations, business plans, and stuff like that? Because that's basically what she's talking about. So that's in your lane of work that you've done. So I was wondering if you run across these as well.
Yeah, I have not personally run into the situation of like people submitting like AI applications. That's wild. But I mean, I can totally see that that's a thing that we have to contend with now. Mm-hmm. At where I work now at Nextracker, which makes solar panel trackers for grid scale solar plants, we do use AI, but in a kind of a positive force multiplier way, like an exoskeleton that makes you more powerful. Mm-hmm. So when we're designing these really big solar power plants, it's gigawatt scale. It's thousands and millions of solar panels, and so to have like a human go through and like kind of design each thing panel by panel, the clean energy revolution is never going to happen if we're doing that. So right. We use computer and machine learning AI to help optimize and design these power plants at these large scales, which helps drive down the cost of clean energy for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everything. The thing that I get everybody to answer at the end of these shows, and by the way, this has been a fascinating discussion. I've enjoyed both you, Todd, as well as you, Dr. Muth, and everything along those lines. But get everybody to answer at the end their notion of a message of positivity for the global audience, because this network, Pod TV, is considered a global network, and all along those lines, and ways that you can be contacted, and anything that you might have not gotten to say that you wanted to say, this is your opportunity to do that as well. So let's see, ladies first or guys first? Ladies first. So I'll start with you, Dr. Muth, and everything like that. So if you got anything that you wanted to get to that you didn't get to, and all along those lines, your message of positivity for the globe, as well as anything that you want to share about how you can be contacted.
So I would say this, the message that I would love to leave with people is that things are never as bad as they seem, right? It's simple, but it is true. It is never as bad as it seems, and it only takes one person to make a significant change. Look at all of the inventions that we've had. Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, it took one person, and you could be that one person. So don't ever give up, and don't ever think that you're so small that your idea can't impact the world, because it can. It can make a huge difference in the world. And just keep sharing and keep going, because the world needs it. The planet needs it. Our humans in this world need what every single person here has to give. If people want to contact me, they can reach out to me on social media. They can find me at Deborah Muth at Facebook. Our clinic information is serenityhealthcarecenter.com and Serenity Healthcare Center at all the social media pages. But feel free, if you're a woman that's suffering from a chronic illness and you're looking for a community, I host a free online community in Facebook called She Knows. And you're more than welcome to join and participate. And we will support you and help you in any way that we possibly can.
Appreciate you and everything. Todd, anything you want to share in terms of a message of positivity, how you can be reached and all along those lines, and anything that you may not have gotten to, even though we did cover a number of the things in this conversation, but anything that you didn't get to that you'd like to share?
Yeah, building on that, the idea of the power of the individual to make these changes, I think is the power of the community and the things that we can accomplish together. And so often the people around us are afraid to act or not sure what to do. And so we as individuals can provide this kind of lightning rod of like, hey, I have this idea. Here's this thing that I want to make happen. Like I'm going to just put a box in front of my house, call it a little free library, and let people like swap books. And then that idea will spread and spread. And soon there's a global network of little free libraries. And all of these moments where just like we can encourage and mobilize and excite hope in other people to make these changes, because we are more powerful together. And as we mentioned, I'm the author of A Hopeful Climate Heist, How to Surf a Hurricane. So if any of these messages resonated with you, you can learn more about the book and also find how to contact me at howtosurfahurricane.com.
Appreciate that and everything. So that was the last question, but before I play the commercial, which will be the absolute last thing and everything along those lines, any positivity messages that y'all have around educators? Because the commercial that I'm going to play, and I may play the Adobe one as well, depending on whether I'm at the 2-hour mark or not, but it's revolving around education and around teachers, but also the support staff around teachers, be that the cafeteria worker, the janitor, the guidance counselor, or a number of others as well. So any message that you have, and you kind of did one earlier, Todd, but I'd love to hear it again and everything as to the importance of education in your own lives and everything. So I'll start with you, Devin, and close out with Todd and then play the commercial.
Education has been so huge for me. I was not always the best student. I was the party girl in high school. I remember my principal coming up to me when we started senior year and saying, when am I going to have your dropout papers on my desk? And that could have really devastated me, but I'm a rebel child. So I was the one that was like, screw you, I'll show you, I can graduate. I have no problem with this, and I will make something of my life. I would say this, educators have a bigger impact on us than we ever think. And you don't always know what you're going to say that's going to encourage somebody or discourage somebody. So I'm grateful for our educators. I have learned so much over the years. I have so many initials after my name. I just keep learning more because I love learning, and I love what learning has opened up for me in the world. But know how powerful you are. And so much so, like, you have to take care of yourself so that you can be there for everyone else that needs you. And I think we don't take care of our educators as well as we should, and the support educators, but they need it more than anybody. They are in the trenches every single day. They see some really horrific things. They see some really amazing things that happen, but we need to take care of them, and they need to take care of themselves as well.
Appreciate that. What about your thoughts, Todd, on educators and their support staff?
Yeah, I mean, for anyone listening, I just encourage you to go and thank an educator. I'm personally so grateful for so many educators throughout my life who made such a difference in inspiring me to reach these topics. And I certainly would not be where I am today without even a creative writing teacher in high school who let me go the extra mile and do National Novel Writing Month, and in this world of teaching to the test, was willing to accommodate flexibility in a student in their creative excitement. So, I do think it's just becoming harder and harder to be a teacher, but especially with what we were talking about with AI, and it's the work is more important than ever. So, yeah, thank you to those out there who are educators.
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. And on that note, we'll have this award that comes from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they celebrate like I said, the educators and the support staff as well. But Dr. Muth and Todd, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully we'll get you back on another edition of the Online Dinner Party. But that's what I do. I just bring people together and we learn from each other. So this has been another fun conversation, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed having the both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
No problem.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop, non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
I won't fold.